So today's webinar, Green School, Taking the Story Global. Really it's from the perspective of growing a K-12 school and some of the verticals and ancillary businesses around that, and the investment lens as well. So great to see everyone here. We've got a real mix of people for this webinar. We've got school owners, school investors, school operators, directors, educators, leaders. We've even got some policymakers here as well, and people who are just generally interested in the Green School story. So general rules, webinar rules, we've got everyone on mute. We really want to hear your questions and input as the conversation develops. There won't be a formal presentation. There will be Q&A in the last 15 minutes of this session, but we're going to take a conversational approach to this and feed off some of the responses from the attendees as well. So the quick rundown of the agenda, I'll explain the context of what we're going to speak about, a little bit about Green School International and the growth. I'll introduce Chris and Simran and pass it over to them, and they can explain in a bit more depth about what they're doing with Green School International. We'll come back again together for the Q&A of some leading questions that we've put together with some input from our network of school owners and school operators and investors. And then finally, again, we can be flexible with time. The last 10, 15 minutes, we'll dedicate that for Q&A from you guys, the audience. So a bit about the context for this webinar first. This is part of a series of webinars that we have put together, Ask Consulting, over the last, actually it's been over the last months, but we've recalibrated somewhat to look at opportunities and challenges of education and business growth in general during the pandemic. Even more so now, we feel it's extremely important we have these conversations so we can understand the relevance of education and how it needs to adapt, again, once more, for the shifting needs of the future. Needs perhaps we thought we understood half a year ago, but have changed again. So a bit about Green School. It's a new model for growth, not just of the school itself, but of its entire ecosystem and ancillary support units, business units. And Chris and Simran will be sharing their insights into operating this organization, growing it, and really what comes next. Not just for the Indonesian education sector where the school operates, but regionally and globally in regards to their growth. So we'll be looking at this from an angle of Green School positioned as successful K-12 operators with a growing international presence and the growth strategy that supports that growth. And Chris and Simran are not afraid from recontextualizing some of the plans they had, considering what's been happening with the pandemic in the last few months. So Simran has just kindly shared that nothing is off limits. So please fire away the questions. But first of all, a bit about the Green School. In terms of private international school with worldwide recognition, I can't think, of course it's anecdotal, but there can't be a more well-known international school, private, in the world with a more powerful narrative behind it. Originally, the Green School was conceived in 2006 by John and Cynthia Hardy, and really it emerged, I'm sure Chris can shed more light on this, from a need that a lot of the people on this call would have had when they started their own schools, was the needs of educating their children in a way that they felt was appropriate to future needs. So the school itself became operational in September 2008, and since then it has grown consistently. Serves today about 800 students. It's K-12, so age groups are 3 to 18 years of age. They currently operate on 2 sites, New Zealand and of course in Bali, with 2 more sites, South Africa and Mexico, opening up in 2021. So a little bit more about the school itself, and that will help us give a platform to Chris and Simran. And it's difficult to do the school justice in the limited time that we've got. And of course, you want to hear from Chris and Simran. So I'll share a link with everyone for a more, for a deeper dive into what the Green School was and is and will be. I direct you to a great report on Education 4.0 by the World Economic Forum. It's called Schools of the Future, Defining New Models of Education for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And essentially it presents a framework for how schools need to meet the needs of the future. And it highlights within the framework 4 key areas: alignment to Education 4.0, potential for scaling up, multi-stakeholder approaches, and of course, development of learner outcomes and improved access to learning. 4 key areas that the Green School are leading, and that's why they're front and center in this report. So in terms of teaching and learning, for those that aren't aware, the Green School focuses on building awareness of the wider world, sustainability, and playing an active role in the global community. The approach to learning is interdisciplinary and thematic, and essentially looks at developing student voice and agency. Of course, the environment of the school, the physical structure of the school is integral to learning processes. Technology is embedded in that as well. If you haven't had a look at the school and you plan to be in Bali, obviously not in the near future, but perhaps next year or further on, I believe they even do school tours. It's a fantastic environment to have a look at. Ultimately, the learning is focused on real world applications, adhering to Education 4.0. They actively partake in teacher education, in pedagogy and curriculum design. I think they've educated teachers in over 50 countries right now. They actively partner with the private sector to find solutions for the school and participate in learning. And of course, they impact the lives of the local community, the stakeholders surrounding schools. They share their learnings with them very freely, their proprietary systems. The green ecosystem of Green Camp, Green English, Green Educators, and Green Village all offer complementary ancillary services to support the school. So it's a magnificent setup, and these processes produce impressive list of outputs and metrics to really demonstrate how the school and the organization positively impacts the lives of their students, the community, and of course, the environment. What comes next? Well, Green School International, the team who are on this call, are taking this model to the world. As I said, they have 2 operational sites already, plan 2 more sites coming in 2021, and the guys will hopefully share what comes beyond that as well. So a little bit about the guys before I pass it over. Chris Saye, Executive Chairman of Green School International. Chris has had a colourful career, let's just call it that. 30 years spanning locations from Texas to Russia, Central Asia, and now Southeast Asia. He started out with a 12-year stint as a Big Four auditor and was a partner at EY in Moscow before joining the private sector, where he developed a niche for representing the interests of founders and shareholders in private companies. This led to his creation of Mark Whitaker in Singapore 8 years ago, a multifamily office serving visionary entrepreneurs. Chris met John Hardy, who we said was the co-founder of Green School in Bali not long after the school opened, about 10 years ago, while his two sons were studying there at the time. In time, John became a key client and business partner of Chris, and Chris now represents John's interests in both Green School Bali and in taking Green School to the world. So as I said, he's the executive chairman of Green School International, the organization he helped found in 2018. At the moment, Chris is officially based in Singapore, but he's been traveling extensively for the past couple of years. If you follow him on LinkedIn or social media, you'll see to some of the places that he's been. He's basically been a global nomad. He's been in Paris for the last 6 months, but he'll be moving back to Bali semi-permanently / permanently over the next couple of months. Simran Singh, Chief Operating Officer, Green School International. Simran's got a very relevant background to Green School and this call. He managed Nord Anglia as a portfolio company at Baring PE Asia. He's advised Cognitia, Nord Anglia CEOs on international expansion at Parthenon, and was part of the team that advised John and Cynthia Hardy for the opening of Green School Bali back in 2008. So his career has spanned private equity to helping scale up fintech startups. And of course, he's currently responsible for overseeing the launch and operations of all new Green School franchises. So, guys, Chris, Simran, I'll pass it over to you. But essentially today we have two burning questions, and the first one is obviously the journey of how you guys got Green School to this stage. And the second one is probably for you, Simran. What on earth comes next? So the floor is yours, guys.
All right. Shall I start with the history then, Oliver?
I think that'd be good.
How we got to where we got, and I'll try to keep this as succinct as possible in terms of what got us to where we can actually, call ourselves Green School International. So, Green School Bali is Green School is a unique place, to say the least, and because it was founded by a creative, it has come through a very creative period and the creative process is often chaotic, and our process of getting us from where we started more than 10 years ago to where we are now has not been without its share of chaos. But a lot of beauty has come out of that, both the physical buildings, and in terms of ultimately what a lot of our students have done and the reach we've had through our students globally. And yeah, to Oliver, to your point, somehow, and I was trying last night to say, how do you describe the Green School magic and how it's become so known? John Hardy created a jewelry company, which he sold for a good sum of money, and it was quite a big brand in the world of jewelry. But it was huge in terms of revenues. But here we are with Green School with 500 students last year, and foreign students at least, in the day school, and we've got a global brand reach, which is actually bigger than this jewelry brand that he created. So it's been pretty amazing to see how that happened. So there was always a vision from John from the very beginning that he wanted to see more than one Green School when he started this thing. And there was always a talk of how does that happen? So many people saw it. From the day I can remember, and when I got involved in things, people would come and say, "I want to have a Green School. How can we have a Green School?" And nothing. And we seemed to kind of always be getting all these inquiries, and nothing. We couldn't move it forward. We looked at different models of how to do that. There were lots of well-intentioned people that came along and said, I'll help do this. I'll do this. I'll build one. But nothing seemed to move. we then did go down a full, and we had a lot of discussions around, bringing in private capital, and should this be and to use the words for-profit or non-profit. We did go down, I think this is an important part to make, we did go down initially a path of saying, let's build this on a fully non-profit basis. And we spent about a year, a bit more than a year actually. We put some money into putting a team together, looking at raising funds in terms of donation funds, and but it proved that just didn't work at the end of the day. So bottom line is we realized that we had to find a way to attract private capital to grow. We did that. So we reached out, it was 10 years after John and Cynthia had used Parthenon, it was referred to as an early consultant to see how we could in the startup of Green School Bali. We reached out to them again a few years ago, and that actually then led to the creation of the team that we have today, where we've focused on a commercial model where we would look to grow schools initially through franchising, and further down the road in terms of owning our own schools. And I'll let Simran speak more to that. But I think that making that decision around a commercial model was a pivotal point for us. And again, part of the kind of the starts and stops of figuring out how we're going to do this. Yeah, I mean, that's really, I thought I'd just give that little introduction as to what got us to where we are today. We have brought in some partners. Initially, our partners have been our founding schools outside of Bali, who have helped fund the international organization, and through that franchising model. And now we're looking really to prove the concept because one of the key questions all along, and I think a lot of the maybe some of those early failed starts was the question was always, can this looks great, this is beautiful in Bali, but will this actually work somewhere else? And what is it that you're actually doing beyond a bamboo building, which bamboo doesn't grow in most of the where most of the populations of the world live necessarily. So you're just going to go, you can't build bamboo schools all over the world. How's this actually going to work? Anyway, we have now moved to where we are, and are quite confident with proving that model outside of Bali, proving that we actually have a product that is in demand. It's alternative for sure. It's not for every parent, but we certainly see, and Simran will speak more to this, in the COVID-19 world, we see it being even more relevant than it was 10 years ago. So I think to say John is visionary in terms of how he put this thing together and what he saw more than a decade ago would be an understatement. So that's where we are today. I mean, a key thing for us was putting together this team and getting the right people involved. Simran is an example of that one of those key people that we brought on. John actually mentioned to me a few months ago when we were in London, and he said, can you imagine trying to do this on our own? I said, no, there's no way. So we had to get that team in place, which obviously was investment required to do that. But getting that team in place has proved absolutely critical. So I think Simran can talk more on a granular level about who some of those key people are and how we're running things. So that's my quick intro.
Great. I mean, thanks, Chris, for sharing that. I mean, there's a few points I think we can round back to later on, particularly with the financial model that you chose, and perhaps the importance of the actual process as well, and having the realization of you need certain partners along the way. And I'm sure there's a lot of nodding heads amongst the school owners who are listening into this one, right? All right, Simran, John sorry, Chris just had the easy part there, basically recounting. So let's have a look at the future with you. What's next?
I think the emergence of every iconic brand is because it's the harbinger of change, and that's the way I view Green School as well. And again, it's a testament to John and Cynthia's vision from 10 years ago, that they recognize that the educational system is essentially broken. We are using 19th century classrooms to teach 20th century skills to 21st century students. And people have tried incremental ways of improving that, but what it required was a complete revolution. But think from scratch as to what is required for people to succeed, and build a system around that. And that's why actually this is the easy part. Like they have done the hard work over the last 10 years, the entire Green School team, and we have seen considerable demand for the product, both as a consumer from people around the world. I think and at Green School Bali, we have about 40 different nationalities of parents. Similarly, even in New Zealand, which is always considered a remote corner of the world, we have about 35 nationalities interested in the school. And then every year we get around 100 applications from people around the world wanting to open their own green schools. So the demand for such a product, be it as an investor, an operator, or as a consumer, I think it's fully evident to everyone out there. The challenge, actually, as Chris pointed out, was making sure that we partner with the right people, and it's not just the people with the right capital, the right location, but it's also very important to find the partners who have the same viewpoint of what a green school should be. In terms of the way that we're expanding, as Chris pointed out, we've started out with the franchising model, and we've actually deliberately chosen very, very different markets. If you look at New Zealand, it actually has a really strong government school-based system. There's very few private schools. So can a green school thrive in a market which has really few private schools? In South Africa, it has a very strong private school, and it's all about, can my kid get into the best university? So can we compete in a market where people value grades and assessments over actual skills that kids are learning? And then Mexico is almost a proxy for the North American market, where 50% of our anticipated population in Green School Tulum is going to come from the US, actually. So if you can succeed in the US market, you can succeed anywhere in the world. So we're trying to use the franchising model to establish that Green School is not unique to Bali. The way that we take the essence of what we've built in Bali and we localize it based on what the requirements of the market in each of those individual places are, means that we can be successful anywhere else in the world. And then the longer term plan, and I would say the 3 to 5 year plan for us, is to then start building our own schools in other parts of the world as well.
Thanks. Great. And again, a lot to touch on there. And just a quick one. The franchise model, obviously building your own schools rather than going down the acquisition route to grow your organization requires a lot of patient capital. So finding the right partners who can support that. Can you shed a bit of light on that, guys? I mean, if you went to the acquisition mode, you'd be looking at PEs. They don't necessarily have the same horizon as more patient investors.
Yeah, again, a lot of the people who are interested in Green School are looking at it from both bringing a change to their community, but also getting a return on their investment. So if there are investors who are interested just in the economic returns, there are better investment opportunities that are available. But if you're looking, what I say is to do good while doing good, this is the right opportunity. And that's the kind of partners we want to attract. And that's why, we are very selective in terms of people who we choose to work with. Um, Selecting the right partners is actually the hardest task for this team. And a lot of the people who are actually interested have no experience in actually opening a school, much less running a school. So we are very hands-on with in terms of the support that we provide, be it from the time of the launch of the school or actually getting them registered with the ministries and getting them all the regulatory approvals that are required, to actually hiring a team for them, which will do the on-ground operations, and then making sure that they are in line with the Green School philosophy every year, as we move forward.
Yeah,
great.
I would add on that we have, I think, as we started this process, we quickly differentiated our potential partners as those with love money and those with, I say, professional money. And the love money, I think we started out with a love money, people who just love the idea, love the concept, but that does bring its challenges in terms of who you're working with, in terms of, like what Simran was talking about. We're now at a stage we're moving away from the love money into some people who still have a very much have a heart, and see the vision. And interestingly, they're not even looking at, really at this point, they're not even looking at the numbers. They just actually see that what we have is something special. And they're willing to, in some ways, I feel like we're like a bit like a tech startup, in the sense that we know something's there. The models kind of go out the window, and we're gonna back you. So we've been fortunate in that, and we're moving now towards more professionals with a heart. So.
And the returns follow whenever you build something which is a product that is in demand everywhere, right? So I think even the professional investors realize that what we have on our hands out here is something that is special, that is unique in the market, and attracts a lot of demand, and will eventually be a good investment in the long run.
Yeah, but it doesn't really work with the PE firms right now. we've had some approaches, and we've had some pretty detailed discussions, but it just hasn't. Yeah, we haven't found a mutual language.
Okay. I don't want to jump around too much. I mean, you guys are offering so much we can pick up on, but perhaps I guess this would be a question for Simran. You give us any insights in how you plan to reach significant scale with the growth of the schools?
Yeah, so each of these schools, the franchise schools that we're looking at, are somewhere in the capacity of 500 to 700. And with the demand that we're seeing, we can actually fill these schools up pretty quickly in terms of ramping up. But our eventual goal for the scale that we want to touch is our own schools, and that's by targeting some of the bigger markets, be it places like Singapore, Hong Kong, California, or even places like China. That's where we will eventually end up gaining full scale, where we can have more control of the operations. Also, we have full humility in the fact that we have not perfected this model as yet. We are learning as we go, and we are using each of these opportunities as a learning opportunity. And by the time we open our own schools, I think we would have gotten really good at this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an important point, the iterative process in developing each of your schools. I guess now's a pretty good time for you to perhaps give us a bit of color on the actual growth expansion strategy going forward, guys. I know you're going to have your destination and your global hub schools, which sounded great this time last year, but things have changed a bit. How have you guys responded to this?
We actually feel that the change that we're seeing in the world is actually a tailwind for us, because if you think about Green School, it's actually a play on three things. One is a sustainable way of living and incorporating that in your life, not as something that you do on top of it, but it's integral to everything that you do. Second is a deeper connection with family. It's not meant to be a school where you just drop off your kids and forget about it. You as a family are learning yourself, but also being part of the learning of your child. And third, it's this concept of remote work, which means that you essentially uh, can go to a beautiful place instead of being in a concrete building somewhere, and actually use the natural environment to learn from it. So each of those things that I mentioned, this sustainable living, I think people are now appreciating the need to be better connected to planet Earth. This deeper connection with family, which is enforced right now, but I think people are especially from all the parents that we speak to, they're really appreciating this time that they're being able to spend with their kids. And third, this ability to now work from anywhere in the world means that the world is literally your oyster in that perspective. So this has actually fueled the demand for something like Green School a lot more. Not to mention the fact that we are wall-less and AC-less, which means that it's easier to social distance in schools like ours. Um, so this initial strategy of focusing on what we call destination schools for the first few years, the wine country in South Africa or the beaches in Tulum, and then moving on to these bigger hubs, the Silicon Valley, London. We still believe in that strategy and are seeing enough demand to justify that belief in our strategy.
Okay, good. We were, Chris, you mentioned earlier about the importance of the team, and obviously critical to the success of GSI's growth, Green School International's growth, is the team that you put together, and you were speaking about some of the struggles you had in the earlier days with that. Can you guys give us an idea of the importance of the team within the school context, school operations, and then in the broader sense in terms of growing globally? How you carved out the roles, how you assigned people, and perhaps some of the key people in your team.
I could take them on, Chris.
Yeah, why don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Chris mentioned this a little bit earlier, that we think of ourselves as a startup, not an established company. So in the sense, the people that we hired for was not just for their skills or experience or expertise, but it was also for their determination, their belief in the mission, their ability to get things done. We actually went from choosing the site in New Zealand to having a fully running school in 9 months in one of the most regulated environments. And if you have people who want to go step by step, process by process, this would have never gotten done. So the number one thing that we look for in our team is getting things done spirit. In terms of the delineation of the work, we've thought of it in four broad buckets. So we have a curriculum and learning team, which is responsible for taking the essence of Green School curriculum and adapting it to the local curriculum requirements. So we're certified in New Zealand. We just submitted our application in South Africa. We've started the work in Mexico. And then that team is also responsible for recruiting and training of our teachers. We have an operations team, which is essentially responsible for coming up with the budgeting, the timelines, more of project management work that is required for launching a school. And then we have a marketing team, which probably has the easiest job, because the brand.
You say that now.
I mean, did you know that Green School has spent $6,000 in 10 years on its marketing?
I did know that, actually.
Organic appeal of this brand, and because again, I think it's because we are authentic to what we say we are, which is what drives the growth out there. And then there's a business development team that looks at all the opportunities that come to us. which is very different from the normal school operators. Having worked with many of the large ones, the business development team is responsible for going out and finding opportunities for opening schools. Here, at some point, we'll start doing that as well. But right now, the inflow of people wanting to open schools as part of our brand is so large that we actually have a dedicated team that evaluates each opportunity that comes to us. And then there's a finance HR section, which makes sure that the wheels keep on turning.
Okay, gives you quite a sizable think tank for development, right? So, just want to come back again, getting a bit circular in our discussion, but just want to come back to the idea that you just mentioned there, Simran, and Chris, you mentioned it earlier, that John and Cynthia had a pretty clear idea of the type of school they wanted to offer. Now, for that vision to still be actualized within not just one site, but two sites and potentially more, 12 years later is pretty significant. So how did you go? I mean, this was actually a question that's been posted privately to us now. How did you guys ensure the ethos of the schools had some kind of longevity and really gave you guys momentum, particularly in terms of revenue with student numbers?
I'll go first and then I'll pass it on to Chris. If you ask people what's special about Green School, everyone has a different answer. Somebody says it's the bamboo architecture. Somebody says it's the way teachers use. Some people say it's a connection with nature. What I think John and Cynthia have done really well is, instead of focusing on these artifacts, they've actually focused on philosophies. So when you think about the Green School New Zealand looks very different from what the Green School in Bali looks at. But I spoke with someone who spent time on both campuses, and they said the more time you spend out there, you can start seeing the similarities, because they might not manifest themselves in the physical representation or even the in-classroom representation, but in terms of the philosophies of what we are trying to achieve out there, be it in terms of helping students connect with nature, be it in terms of training students on a skill-based entrepreneurial way of life rather than a knowledge-based way of life, where all that matters is how much knowledge you can take in, and then eventually preparing them for the world that we live in rather than the world that we used to live in, or even in the way we recruit and train teachers. I think one of John's favorite questions to ask teachers would be, how did you spend your summer? And if the answer was, oh, I was on the couch drinking beer and watching television, then we knew you're not the right fit for Green School. But if you were out there, we've had teachers who've been on missions to save whales. We've had teachers who've spent time in rural villages in their summer holidays, training people to have a better way of life. So it's been very easy to export those philosophies, and if the answer from John and Cynthia would have been, hey, these are specific artifacts, we do need bamboo, we do need this specific lesson to be taught, that would have been much tougher to adapt in these different environments. Chris, would love your thoughts as well.
I agree. I think we have, and I don't have a standard list in my head of what those key elements of the ethos are. I mean, certainly the architecture in the place is something, and the connection with nature is an element. People ask us a lot, well, what's your curriculum? And and it's less about what our curriculum is, more about how we teach and the way we teach and the angle which we come at things. Very much the entrepreneurial project-based way of teaching. And then the third element, and I think ultimately that's what we've discovered. It was this kind of three elements. It's the environment, which includes the connection with nature and a form of an iconic building, which creates a bit of a wow factor when you walk on campus. I mean, that is one of our is part of our ethos. So it's our way of teaching. and then it's this community element as well, as Simran already mentioned. So those are the three things we keep in mind, in all these locations. That's how we're sticking to our ethos.
Let me make this a little bit real for people who are not aware of the Green School way of learning. So, for example, kids in grade 4 are actually given a chicken farm to run. And the idea is not for them to learn how to run a chicken farm, but what are they learning? They're learning teamwork, because they have to run it as an entire class. They have to set up a structure to get this done. They learn business. They learn, how do they buy more chickens? Do they sell more chickens? What do they do with the eggs? How do they negotiate with different people? And then thirdly, this element of connecting with nature as well. You're actually playing with those chicken and working on the soil, etc. That's a skills based approach to learning that we've been expounding about, and it just prepares kids for a much better path in life later on, rather than just learning rote formulas and knowledge that you can find on your cell phone at any given moment.
Yeah, I think now's a good time to bring this point up, and this was a question just sent to us privately again. So with education, context is everything, and which you guys have just been explaining, and you guys have, and the Green School and the ancillary business units have taken this to a very heightened level in your school in Bali. Very aware of your local stakeholders and empowering them, giving them as well voice and agency. But how will you plan to address this in your school in New Zealand, the local context, while also adhering to the key philosophies? And so basically having consistency of student experience across all Green Schools while adhering to what needs to be done in the local context.
Let me give some concrete examples. So the Balinese way of life is actually very integral to what we do in Green School Bali, which in terms of the way we celebrate the festivities, in terms of the way we serve lunch, it's incorporated in every way of life. Now, when we've taken it to New Zealand, obviously it doesn't make sense to incorporate that part of the school culture into New Zealand as well. Again, take it a step further up. What's the philosophy behind that? The philosophy was that it's really important to understand the community that you live in and connect with it. The place that we built the school in New Zealand is next to an iwi, which is the Maori tribes, a collection of Maori tribes out there. So actually today itself, the New Zealand school, they've done what is called a hangi, which is you prepare the meal in the traditional Maori way, and they've distributed it to 150 people. So that's, again, the idea is take whatever is the philosophy and then apply it in a very local context. We have a beautiful river in both our Bali and New Zealand campuses as part of the campus. So that's our natural swimming pool. So we some things you can just take as they are and apply in a local context, but whatever is not applicable in a copy paste manner, what we do is we try to take it a step above what are our ethos, and then see how we can apply it in a local context.
I think the only other thing I would add is there are some very standard things we're doing in our learning in the learning pathways, like in middle school. Our middle schoolers do at the end of their middle school time, they do it's called the Quest, and it culminates a big research project, and it culminates in a kind of TED type talk that they give to the entire school. And they learn a lot going through that process. High school, the same. It's just on a more kind of on a bigger scale, and called the Greenstone. So it's a passion project that every kid chooses, and they go through. So, and those are things which absolutely are key to the learning experience in each of the new schools as well. And it can be translated locally because it transcends geography.
Okay, so I'm going to have to push you on this one, guys, and perhaps if you could view it from the green school angle, GSI angle, as we discussed prior to this call, but also perhaps from a more industry-wide angle as well, and that's the idea about the future. And there's been a great deal of discussion and forecasting related to international student movement, international staffing. Simran mentioned earlier about will people travel anymore? Will there be continued work from home, and how will that impact K-12 schools and support services around that? For example, the ones that you guys operate as well, and how will that play out over the next couple of years? You perhaps already shared that you're getting some positive results out of this situation for Green School. But how do you anticipate this will impact the broader education sector, K-12?
Look, we are under no illusion that in the short term, specifically over the next 6 to 12 months, hopefully sooner, the K-12 market in general is going to be impacted severely, and part of it is just because schools won't be able to open safely for a long time. And for us, it's an even bigger hit because we depend a lot on expats, so people being able to travel freely across borders. But I don't think that fundamentally the K-12 model is going to be completely turned topsy-turvy by this pandemic. You actually see in the US out here, the first thing the government wants to open back up is schools, because if schools don't open, people can't go back to work. So this is very different from what's going to happen in the higher education, the university system versus K-12. So our hypothesis is that the overall model of K-12 is going to remain pretty steady. Will there be incorporation of online models? We're not so sure. What does have to change is it's not the medium of how we are taught, but actually what we are taught and how we are taught. And by how, I don't mean the medium, but the principles behind those methods. So people are going to start asking as to whether it actually makes a difference in terms of going to the school campus to learn something that you can learn online as well. So what's the added advantage of being on campus to learn something? And schools that can differentiate themselves based on that specific factor, what is the value add of bringing a child onto campus, will be able to thrive to a higher degree when we come out of this pandemic.
Yeah. Okay. So the student experience will. Do you anticipate it will fundamentally change?
We hope so, because often it requires big events like this to fundamentally change the way things are run. And for a long time, we've been okay with the status quo because there's been nothing to challenge it. Much like every other aspect of our life, I think this pause that we've had has given us time to rethink as to what we were doing. Is that the right way of doing things? I'm hoping that both parents, teachers, students, everyone who's part of the K-12 ecosystem recognizes that things can be done in a better way than what we've been doing for the past 100 years without much change.
Okay. I just there's a few questions coming through now. The first one is from Jaspal Sidhu, and I'll read it verbatim. with the scaling of green schools and the franchise model, what exactly is being standardized, and how do you supervise to ensure green school standards?
Chris, do you want to take that?
Well, in terms of what's being, I mean, I think we talked a lot about the standardized is really the philosophy in terms of what we're standardizing. And you know, a lot of it has been around, and really at this stage, and I guess the way to answer your question in terms of how we're enforcing that philosophy, and then because what is not necessarily standardized is the learning, the granular learning program in each location, because that's basically customized for each of our locations. But we're doing that is being led by our former principal in Green School Bali. So that's actually, I think, a key way of how we're doing that is taking all that. And she spent 8 years in Bali. She knows what went right. She knows what went wrong, and is now able to take that experience again based on the philosophy and really build the learning experience in each of the locations. So she is literally traveling to each location and spending months there as we open each school. So that's a key area. On the design front, because again, the environment that is a key area. John, with his design background and his love for that and passion for that, is involved in each of those the decisions around you know, the school environment. So John Hardy and what effectively is our in-house design team is actively involved in each of the schools as well.
And just while there's actually a Green School Way checklist that each school has to adhere to, but it looks very different from, you know, let's say a McDonald's franchise checklist. Again, it's things like, have we incorporated the local culture in our curriculum? Are we teaching in a skills-based manner? That's the kind of checklist that each school has to certify before the launch of the school, and then we accredit it on a yearly basis as well.
Okay, thanks. Let's move to another question. This one's from Puspa, school director actually in Bali, I believe. Again, I'll read it. How do you set standards for the Green School graduate competencies, considering different experiences your students have in the spectrum of blended philosophy and the local genius and wisdom?
Yeah, I'm sure our educator team will do a better job of answering this.
Okay.
But in terms of ensuring, you know, consistency across the different campuses and making sure that there's similar standards, the eventual goal is for students and educators and staff to be able to move freely across this network, and therefore it's important to set those standards. So one of the things that, for example, we've done is we are part of this consortium called the Mastery Transcript Consortium, which allows you to assess students without having them to go through a standardized test. And that is going to be applied across all the different campuses to make sure that it's easy for people to move in between different campuses. Okay.
Thanks for sharing. So I just want to round this out because I'm very conscious of everyone's time. So for everyone listening into this, Simran and Chris, just a 30-second round off if you could. What advice, what top tips, what takeaways, what learnings could you share with them about growing a school business to the anticipated scale of Green School International?
I just say that think of running a school as just like running every other business. You've got to tailor your product based on the needs and requirements of the clientele that you want to go after. And once you do that, remember Green School is that shining example of a different, unique product which we could scale up and continue to deliver on our very high standards.
Yeah, I would say really focus on the heart where is the heart leading you in terms of what it is you're building? You know, I often think back to Steve Jobs and his creating of Apple and the iPhone. He didn't do that in order to make money. I mean, he became super wealthy. He did that because he wanted to change how we interact with technology, and he wanted something beautiful. I mean, it was his heart leading him. So, if you're led by your heart, then I think then the money and the finances then follow.
And one final thing: build a great team. You always think you can do it all on your own. It's really hard, especially opening a school. It takes a village, literally, sometimes. So build the team, build a complementary team. Especially try and identify what are your weaknesses, and hire people who can help you fulfill those weaknesses.
Definitely, yeah.
Well, Chris, Simran, thank you so much for sharing. I think we could go on all day hearing about the stories and what's coming next with Green School. Truly unique, great learnings for everyone. Thank you again. Very conscious to get you to bed, Simran, and Chris, you can start your day. For everyone else, thanks for joining. Same time next week, we'll be joined by Jaspal Sidhu, who posted a question. Founder and chairman of CIS Group of Schools and Inspirasi Schools. And he'll be speaking about his journey in the education sector and really how he made education for all become a reality, delivering consistency of learning across multiple price points, not only in Indonesia, but regionally and globally now as well. So please join us for that one there. So again, thank you every one of our speakers. Thanks for our attendees. Be well, be safe. Thank you very much indeed. Bye, everyone.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone.